Thank you for joining my lecture. Today, I would like to talk about the contradictions and fallouts of the Holocaust. The Holocaust, the mass murder of Jewish people, was the most horrific human rights abuse in human history, in which a state systematically carried out genocide against a specific ethnic group. Each of us must reflect on why such atrocity occurred, how it was carried out, and what we must do to ensure that such a tragedy is never repeated. About 2,000 years ago, the Jewish people were driven out of what is now Palestine by the Roman Empire and became scattered across the world. This dispersion is called the diaspora. In Christian Europe, Jewish people who maintained their own religious beliefs and ways of life were subjected to discrimination. They were forbidden to own land and were not allowed to join craft guilds, associations of artisans. Therefore, while Shylock was depicted as a villainous Jewish moneylender in Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, Jewish people acquired knowledge and education, lived in cities, and engaged in financial businesses such as money lending. In the 18th century, when the Industrial Revolution began in Britain and capitalism developed, some Jewish moneylenders rose to become major bankers and powerful capitalists, such as the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds came to wield great influence around the world. In 1917, during World War I, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour, seeking financial support from Jewish capital, including the Rothschilds, announced his intention to endorse the establishment of a national fund for the Jewish people in Palestine. Before World War I, when Adolf Hitler failed the entrance exam for an art academy and was living as a drifter in Vienna, about 10% of the city's population was Jewish. At the same time, the mayor, who openly promoted anti-Semitism, spread anti-Semitic propaganda, creating an atmosphere in Vienna that was saturated with hostility toward Jews. Hitler likely felt a sense of envy and inferiority toward Jewish people who had achieved success as businessmen, scholars, doctors, lawyers, and artists. On the other hand, Hitler likely viewed the impoverished Jewish refugees from Eastern Europe with their distinctive traditional clothing, hats, and long beards as a threat that would defile German blood purity. Hitler came to regard Jews as an absolute evil seeking to destroy the Aryan German, and he began to view them as a race carrying genetically harmful traits. In modern times, many Jewish people living in Germany, while maintaining their own religious traditions and cultural identity, lived their daily lives without ever doubting that they were Germans. Hitler was appointed Chancellor in 1933, and when President Paul von Hindenburg died in 1934. He consolidated power completely by assuming the combined position of Führer, holding both the presidency and the chancellorship. Hitler expelled Jews from public offices, revoked their licenses to practice as doctors and lawyers, and imposed restrictions on their admission to universities. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws were enacted, distinguishing between Jews and Germans on the basis of blood. Subsequently, regulations defining who was considered a Jew were issued. Under these regulations, if 3 or more of a person's foregrandparents were Jewish, the person was classified as a full Jew. If 2 of the foregrandparents were Jewish, the person was considered a full Jew if they themselves were Jewish, and a half Jew if they were not. If only one of the foregrandparents was Jewish, the person was classified as a quarter Jew. Even someone who was ethnically a pure Aryan German, could be labeled as Jewish if a grandparent had merely converted to Judaism. People classified as half Jews or quarter Jews were not sent to concentration camps, but they were subjected to various forms of discrimination. The most problematic and contradictory point was that, although Nazi Germany claimed to base its definition of Jews on bloodline and race, the actual criteria were in fact based on religion, not ancestry. Nazi Germany attempted to define Jews as an inferior race through so-called scientific criteria, but it failed. This was because Jewish people who had been dispersed across the world since ancient times were diverse in appearance and genetic background and were fundamentally a religious and cultural community rather than a biological race. In 1938, during what became known as Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, synagogues and Jewish-owned shops were looted and destroyed. The event is called Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, because the shattered glass from Jewish-owned shops, homes, and the synagogues lit up the streets sparkling like crystal. In 1939, immediately after Germany occupied Poland, it began forcibly relocating Jews into designated residential districts known as ghettos. In 1941, Nazi Germany required all Jews aged 6 and older to wear the Yellow Star of David. The Wannsee Conference was held on January 20, 1942, during which Nazi Germany decided on a systematic and organized plan to annihilate approximately 11 million Jews living in Europe. Nazi Germany operated more than 44,000 camps and detention sites. Among the major concentration camps were Auschwitz in Poland, the largest of the Nazi camps, with an estimated 1.1 to 1.5 million victims, Treblinka also in Poland, the second largest in scale after Auschwitz, with approximately 800,000 to 900,000 victims, Dachau in Germany, the first concentration camp established by the Nazis, and Bergen-Belsen, where Anne Frank, the author of the Diary of Anne Frank, was imprisoned. Jews were transported to the concentration camps in freight trains. The Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. Upon arrival at the concentration camps, SS doctors separated people to the right or left with a single movement of the thumb. About 70 to 80%, the elderly, children, pregnant women, the sick, and mothers with small children were sent directly to the gas chambers. The remaining 20 to 30%, healthy young people and adults, had their heads shaved, were tattooed with prisoner numbers on their arms, and were forced into brutal labor. The gas chambers were disguised as shower rooms, and to prevent panic resistance, signs such as shower room and disinfection were posted at the entrance, where people were instructed to leave their belongings. Once everyone had entered, the doors were shut and locked from the outside, and Zyklon B, a cyanoid-based pesticide, was dropped in through openings in the ceiling or windows. Within a few minutes to about 20 minutes, the victims were killed. After the killings, members of the Sonderkommando, Jewish prisoners forced into labor, carried the bodies from the gas chambers to the cremation facilities. They also forced the Sonderkommando to extract gold teeth rings and other valuables from the bodies. Jews who were able to work in the concentration camps were forced to perform harsh labor, such as road construction, laying railway tracks, expanding the camps, and cutting stone in quarries. They were also forced to work in munitions factories, producing weapons, ammunition, and aircraft parts. They were also forced to recover gold teeth and hair from the bodies of fellow prisoners murdered in the gas chambers and to process the remains in the crematoria. They themselves were periodically killed to maintain secrecy. The prisoners were given less than the minimum calories necessary for human survival, made to sleep packed together on bunks where several people had to lie on their sides in a single tier, and issued only one thin striped uniform while sanitary conditions were atrocious. Many Jews in the concentration camps died from infectious diseases and starvation. The Nazi concentration camps were liberated by Allied forces between 1944 and 1945, revealing to the world the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime. The person who led the Banzi Conference prepared its minutes and oversaw the practical operations of deporting Jews by rail from across Europe to the extermination camps was SS officer Adolf Eichmann. Eichmann, one of the key organizers of the Holocaust, fled to Argentina after the war and lived under the alias Ricardo Clement. He worked as an auto mechanic and lived there with his family. Israel's intelligence agency Mossad located Eichmann's whereabouts, apprehended him on the street in Argentina as he was returning from work, and secretly transported him to Israel. He was sentenced to death on May 31, 1961, in the trial held in Jerusalem, and the sentence was carried out on May 31, 1962. Eichmann was not a monstrous killer, but rather an ordinary and remarkable citizen, and he was not unique. Many SS members involved in the Holocaust were, in their private lives, good fathers, good husbands, and good sons. Yet when an organization moves in a dangerous direction, the pressure to conform and the risks of speaking out make it nearly impossible for an individual to stop it, allowing such terrifying madness to unfold. What the Holocaust suggests to us today and for the future is profoundly significant. To ensure that such a tragedy is never repeated, there is much we must learn from this historical lesson. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel to maintain these education activities. I'm looking forward to seeing you again.